Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Delara, and I am joined by producer Corey. And this episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at props.cash. You can get that for 25% off your first month with code Delara25. That's Dellera 25. Props.cash is an absolutely instrumental tool to your prop betting arsenal. Look, it's NBA season right now. We're out of the All-Star break. We are heading into the home stretch of the NBA season and the playoffs. We have a whole season's worth of data that you can have at your fingertips with props.cash. They got a website, they have an app, they have projections on both of those. You can see their pass lines, you can see their performance, you can see how they stack up in this particular matchup against their opponents. It's an absolute tool that you have to have. I use it every single day when I'm betting. You can get that for 25% off your first month with code Delara25. So, producer Corey, how are we doing today? I know that you braved the severe outdoor weather to go to the NHL Classic, the Winter Classic. How do you feel about that? Oh, whatever, you know. That's awesome. That's great. Maybe we'll have to record a podcast. I think outdoors one day just for the culture. Get a little bit of get a little tailgate pod. Maybe get some people to come over. That'd be sick. Speaking No, that one might come out late. You get the props early on the live show. But with that kind of in mind, though, we did, before we kind of got into it. Obviously, we have some time before these games. This episode's going to be dropping like late Tuesday night into Wednesday. Our games start on Thursday. Me and producer Corey, we were looking at some of our metrics for the podcast, and you can see some of the countries like where people are listening from. So we did want to give a shout out to obviously all of our listeners. Like we do obviously get the bulk of our listeners from North America, being the United States, Canada, and even Mexico to a degree. But we did want to shout out. We have a bunch of Aussie listeners, so appreciate you guys. But there were a couple countries where we just have like one dedicated dude or chick or woman or however you identify. Like, let's just not get into this debate or this early in the podcast. Producer Corey, do you want to highlight any of our favorites here or any of our solo dolos based on your analytics? And this is your department here. This is some actual information you can't get on props.cash. All right. Yeah. Besides that, we got Finland. Yeah. 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 There's a couple. Yeah, so try to tell some other people. We got one person in Ghana, so and one person in Ecuador. So we just figured we were like with this. We suddenly realized we're like Corey's Mr. Worldwide over here as a producer, and we are yeah, and we are reaching the corners of the world. We have not cracked into North Korea. That is our next goal. Yeah, that is our next goal. So if anybody wants to just give us that little spark of joy and put their VPN in North Korea, like please go for it. That would be cool. It will definitely Yeah, it would definitely be cool. Cause absolute chaos over there with the Un family. So I I don't know. Like I say tweets like I think just by measure, like like just by habit, but it was just all in there. Yeah, like I've been saying I know. I've been saying X now like when I talk about the platform, but I do still say tweets as opposed to posts, I guess is what it would be. No. No. No, it's ridiculous. Like posts are for your mom on Facebook. Call it a day. But now, like, we may as well get into the regular season here. I'm going to hit you guys with one of my favorite bets. Now, we'll talk a little bit about some futures, and then we will get into the slate as well. But my favorite bet on this Thursday slate is Kristaps Porzingis over 18 and a half points. I love this matchup against the Chicago Bulls and Nikola Vucevic. So part of why I like this spot is when we look at what Chicago does. Chicago gives up a lot of threes. It's partially, I guess, by scheme, partially because they kind of suck. And when you look at their 3-point distribution, they're allowing the highest percentage or the highest frequency of 3-pointers. But they are also 17th in defensive shooting efficiency. So that's actually not like the worst thing. If you're giving those shots up by design, it's fine, as long as you can kind of defend them well. What Chicago has actually done is, because they do have pretty strong point of attack defenders in, Alex Caruso, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, even DeMar DeRozan's not like the worst defensive player like out there right now. What they do though is they do a really good job of limiting like walk up threes, like off the dribble threes. So you're not getting as many threes from your guards unless it's due to ball movement and the ball like getting rotated around the perimeter. They're giving up a lot more in terms of catch and shoot. So that's like where a guy like Kristaps Porzingis I think is super valuable here. He can take threes from any part of the floor, whether it's the corner, whether it's above the break, whether it's on the wing. And he's not somebody that's exactly trying to make his own shot. He's not somebody that's bringing the ball up the court, but he's being found a lot of times due to gravity or due to, just the way that the offense is kind of running. In this particular matchup against Vucevic, I like it. I think that they'll probably try to use Porzingis to draw him out of the paint to a degree, help soften that interior up a bit. And even though Chicago has been running that Drummond Vucevic lineup, if anything, that only helps what we're doing here. So I like Porzingis to go over the 18 and a half points. You could dabble with his threes as well. It's set at 1.5. You can get 3 at about plus 220 on FanDuel at the time of this recording. So that is my favorite bet on the board for Thursday. And I wanted to make sure that I got that out for you guys at this point in time. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the futures market, but a little bit about how I think you need to handle the rest of the NBA season. So when the All-Star break, people always are thinking about it and they're just like, oh, this is it's the central point of the season. And, like we have so many more games left. We're beyond that. We're past the central part of the season. The central part of the season was a couple weeks ago. We are now in the home, like basically the home stretch. There are only a number of games left. And when you look at the playoff scenarios, right? There's not too many games left for a lot of these teams. These teams, they play 80, it's an 82 game season, and they have some of them only like 27 games left. Some of them even fewer games remaining. Some teams like the Bucks only have, what do they have left? They only have 26 games. So there's a couple of teams that really just do not have a lot of games left. And that's important for not only when you look at the standings, it's like, oh, like this team's only 2 games behind them, or they're only they're only a game behind them or 3 games behind them. There's so many more factors that you need to consider in terms of not only tiebreakers, but you also need to consider the fact that there's not a lot of games left. So catching up 3 games early in the season, not a big deal. Later in the season, obviously, is much more significant. Also, when you look at the standings, like right now, if you go on just on like Google, right? For example, if you go on and you look up the NBA standings, if you look at the Eastern, or let's look at the West is more interesting. If you look at the Western Conference, the Nuggets right now are in 4th. They are 1 game back of the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers are 36-17. The Nuggets are 36-19. So they're only 1 game back, but they're 2 games back in the loss column. those are games that are much harder to make up, especially at the top of the bracket. These teams aren't losing at the same rate, and you can't get those losses back. You have to have the other team lose, which when you have teams that are winning like 67, 68% of their games, it's much more difficult to then make up ground. And then even towards the bottom of the standings, like if you have like the Lakers are 1.5 games ahead of the Golden State Warriors. They're both tied in the loss column, and the Warriors have 3 more games than the Lakers have to play. So the Warriors, in theory, could win all 3 of those, and then they're in a much, they would be tied with the Lakers in the win column. So they still have a little bit of ground to make up there. Just based on the fact they're tied in the loss column. So those are just a couple things to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about well, this team, they're sitting in this position, they could move up. It isn't as easy as you would think. So even looking at the West, to me, I think the West is pretty secure in their top 4 seeds with the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Clippers, and the Nuggets. And then, even the difference in the loss column between the Timberwolves and the Nuggets is 3 losses. And that's the same difference between the Nuggets and the Suns and the Pelicans, who sit in tied for 5th. And then if you go all the way down to the Warriors, the difference between the Timberwolves and the Warriors is 10 losses. So those are just ranges like you're obviously not going to make up. So a lot of the things, it gets a little bit stickier at this point in the season. With that in mind, one of the teams that I am high on, I'm pretty high on the Warriors. I like what they've been able to do. Podziemski looks excellent in the starting rotation. He's looked excellent before, but he looks a little bit better now. And I like what Klay Thompson has kind of been able to do now, saying like, I'm willing to come off the bench. We'll see if Steve Kerr sticks with that. But I do think that that's a very notable point for this Golden State Warriors team. If Kerr has the flexibility, and like if Klay is somebody that's going to say like, all right, like I'll play off the bench, contract year, going to be a Hall of Famer, and he's willing to say like I'll play off the bench, you put a lot of those egos aside, and that is really going to help the Warriors moving forward, I think. Looking at some of the awards markets, I think it's important that you don't have to rush into anything. I've talked in a couple different podcasts this week about awards. I talked on buckets. I talked on the early read with Reed Wallach, friend of the show. We've had him on before. I talked about some of my awards thoughts. To just put it out plainly, I think that Rookie of the Year is done. It's Victor. Defensive Player of the Year is done. It's Rudy Gobert. I think Most Improved Player is likely done. I think it's Tyrese Maxey's award to lose. I think that a lot of the push right now in the market is based on a little bit of struggling without Joel Embiid, but at the same time, the numbers are still tremendous. He still can take over games. He's an all-star. Tyrese Maxey should win this award. He's somebody that people have wanted to vote for. He's been the favorite all season long. I haven't seen anything where I'm like, all right, we need to seriously consider reevaluating this vote in this position. So obviously, if you tell me in the Action app, you should feel pretty comfortable based on the fact that we have the top 2 players. We have Tyrese Maxey at 14-1 preseason, and we have a Kobe White ticket at 30-1. So he is the second favorite. We are sitting in a pretty good position right now. I do not think that you need to add to that. In regards to Coach of the Year, I haven't bet it. I don't really think I intend to. I think if I did have to place a bet, it would be on Dagnall, the coach of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think that Missoula maybe is worth something, but at the same time, there's no like real rush or real push to give him some like accreditation for really inheriting what has been an incredible team. In regards to clutch player, a couple different people have been on this from Action. Jim Turvey, NBA First Three. Steph Curry seems like he should win the award. He's got a ton of clutch games. Clutch shooting percentages are great. I think he's the rightful favorite. I don't really have another position in this market. I have like a little bit on Halliburton, a little bit on Brunson, but I don't think I would play anything else. I think the most compelling award right now is the MVP. And obviously, Nikola Jokic is the favorite right now, with Joel Embiid having basically been eliminated due to the lack of games and the injuries. I think that there's probably a little bit of value on SGA. However, and this was a conversation that we had at greater length on buckets, but I think that the better bet, instead of, if you think that SGA could win, or if you have like an SGA ticket, or if you have a Jokic ticket and you're trying to figure out like if you want to hedge or something, I think that the better bet is to bet on the Oklahoma City Thunder to be the 1 seed in the West. You're getting a better number. It's at plus 340 instead of like plus 220 for SGA. You, I think, are getting the path to SGA winning MVP. I struggle to see a scenario where the Thunder are like a game, maybe 2 games better than Denver if they're if they're not the 1 seed and Shea getting it. I think that when you watch Jokic play ball, and you watch him on the court, there's like no real denying that he's the best player on the court in pretty much every game that he's playing in. It's not that I don't feel that way about Shea, but I think that Jokic has like the pedigree. He's somebody that voters want to vote for, and I think all of that matters. That being said, I think that Bontemps obviously releases his straw poll, and his straw poll is like the Bible for this type of thing. Right now, I think the third iteration of the straw poll is the last one that has been extremely indicative of who will win the MVP. That straw poll comes out basically right towards the end of the season and it's comprised of about like 100 voters or something like that. When you get that information to come out, that is the time to go and just absolutely hammer whatever the voting was. I think that if you want to wait, you can wait. I don't think that you need to enter this market right now, but I think if you're trying to hedge, I don't think that you're really going to get too much of a better number on Jokic than minus 140, unless Oklahoma City is able to make a run to the 1 seed. And in which case, I think I would rather bet Oklahoma City as the 1 seed as opposed to Shea MVP. I think you're getting better value and you're getting more outs. Obviously, it's possible Shea could, maybe the Thunder don't come in first and then Shea also wins MVP. So it's not like a true hedge, but I do think that it still gives you the possibility of potentially winning both bets. But I think that you are getting better odds on what would be needed to get him there. So I think that's how I would kind of tackle that award. Now, looking at player props, I think that now is probably one of the hardest times to bet on props. I think that there is so much information. I think the lines are a lot sharper. You have a full season basically worth of data of what to go off of. And there's a lot of teams right now with 25, 26, 27 games left in the season that, because of the play-in tournament, are not dead yet. They're kind of involved. Like the Utah Jazz, the Houston Rockets, 11 and 12th in the West, a couple games out of the play-in. In the East, I think it's particularly interesting because the Raptors probably still trying. They are 5 games out of the play-in. Brooklyn presents an interesting situation with the firing of Jacques Vaughn. So new head coach. They're in the 11th seed. They don't own their own picks. I think that they're going to be trying moving forward to, they're going to be pressing. There's no reason for them to falter, to tank. It doesn't benefit them in any way. So I think the Eastern Conference, especially at the bottom, could stay competitive between the Nets, the Hawks, the Bulls, in particular at that bottom part of the bracket. Additionally, you have players and teams jockeying for position. And with that comes different like circumstances, right? So Philly, I think they just are trying to get into the playoffs right now, figure out what the Embiid injury is, try to survive. Miami is one of those interesting teams where I don't know how much they care about the regular season. And honestly, if they are in the play-in tournament, I still don't think they care. They have the best coach in the NBA in Spoelstra, and they have a guy like Jimmy Butler who can be the best player in a playoff series, in pretty much any playoff series that he's in. And even if he's not necessarily the most talented, you know that he's going to be giving 150%. So I don't think that they're super concerned if they have to sit and play in a play-in tournament game to get into the playoffs. And wind up resting guys a little bit more than normal down the stretch and just trying to treat it basically as saying like, look, like we just need to be healthy. Let's just get there. So there's always like the motivation aspect that's a little bit wonky. Additionally, then you have some teams who are going to be playing, either their reserves because they're trying to rest some of their guys on the back stretch of the season, or you're going to have teams like playing their younger guys because they need to get some reps. They need to get those guys out there and figure out like, do we have something here? Is there something that we can do? Like, do we need to re-sign this guy? Like, what are we trying to do next year? Like, or is this somebody that, maybe we can build their value up and we can trade them in the offseason to get the pieces that we want? And that kind of brings us to where we can find our edge. We can find our edge in not necessarily the veterans all the time, but we can find our edge in these teams, like these gross games where we're looking for players in expanded roles. We're looking for teams that have said like, you know what, let's pack it in after the All-Star break. We're done. We just want to make sure that we get out of the regular season. We'll get our draft pick, but like, look, we're going to let these young kids play and see what we have here. So maybe we know how to draft better next year. So one player in particular that I'm looking at for a player like that is I'm looking at Deni Avdija. Deni has been incredible over the past couple of games. He's really just smashed on his props. He scored, I think it was 20 plus in 4 straight games. And this is obviously a tougher matchup against the Denver Nuggets. Denver's defense is still not like elite. They're just a better team. Obviously, there's some blowout potential. My thing with blowout potential, and you're the Washington Wizards, I don't know like how much it matters. And also because they've taken the ball out of like Jordan Poole's hands as much, Kyle Kuzma's hands as much, and you're giving the ball to a younger guy like Deni, who you're saying like, let's see what we got here. He was a relatively highly drafted player. Let's see what the talent level is here. I like Deni in this matchup. His points line is at 15.5. What's interesting though is so you can get 15.5 at -102 at FanDuel. You can get 15 plus at -125 if that's something you're interested in. I think the 15.5 at -102 is fine. I don't know if I really am super interested in paying 20 cents of juice basically for 1 point. When we look at him, his projections, Props.cash has projections at 21.1 points. So that's a 5.6 like point edge. And additionally, like when we're just looking at what he's done, I'm not really looking at him as a player that I'm like, oh, like he's going to go over by like 2. I think that he could go over by 5, 6, 7. Like I think I could see him scoring in the mid or low 20s. So I'm comfortable in this circumstance, paying a little, like getting a little bit of less juice and taking a little bit of a quote unquote riskier line. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that like the implied odds are so different. And I think that that's always something important to consider. So if you think that a player is going to go like way over a line, I'm not like super interested in paying the juice on the base rung just to ensure that like I hit one. I'd rather just say like, all right, well, like I'm just going to play the higher, like a slightly higher line with less juice because I do have exposure upwards after that anyway. So I'd rather play like for a guy like Deni in this spot, I'd rather play the 15.5 at -102 as opposed to like a 14.5 or, a 15 plus at -125. So that's not like something, and that's not something that you really see or you really see like explained, I think, very well on social media, because a lot of people obviously, like you guys know, like I love to rip the bangs and like we victory lap it, like whatever. But look, at a -102, there's an implied odds of 50.5%. At -125, the implied odds are 55.56%. In other words, you need to hit that same play 5% more often to turn a profit. When I'm looking at this, based on the way that I am capping the game, what Denny's done in his expanded role, I don't think that margin is worth the jump in implied odds. I don't think that like the 1 point from 14 and a half to 15 and a half is worth it. And I think that that's always something that's super important to consider when you're betting on these plays. And I know like there are some people out there that basically only want to bet plus money plays. I don't, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in this particular instance, the delta between the minus 102 at 15 and a half is not the same, or is not worth it, between the 14 and a half and the minus 125, in terms of like what my payout is, especially as a flat better. I don't think it's worth it. I think you're much better off paying the minus 102 as opposed to the minus 125. That is different than other circumstances. I think that there are some times where it's worth paying like heavy juice on a prop. And some of those instances, a lot of times, are turnover props. And like in baseball, when we bet pitching outs, and not to go into obviously like pitchers and catchers reporting soon. We'll talk some MLB later, but not to get like super into it, but like for me, when I look at some of those pitcher outs, it's like I like to bet under 18 and a half outs. And you'll get those at like minus 180, minus 190. Some of them are even like minus 210. They're still worth it, just because that, like, in that particular spot, that out is so significant because it's going from 6 full innings to you're pitching successfully in the 7th inning. That's the difference. So there are circumstances where paying that heavy juice makes sense. In this spot, it's different. I don't think that there is like a significant difference. There's not a significant threshold between 14 and a half and 15 and a half on a prop that I really like. And I think that he could score 20 plus. So that's my pontificating on Denny Avdia. With that though, some of the other spot, I see Corey just, making his notes here. But I do want to talk a little bit about the slate. The New York Knicks take on the Philadelphia 76ers. Shout out Vinny. I hope you guys lose. Philly is the worst. With that, we got to look at some of these injury report things, because we'll get the injury reports. They'll probably come out. We'll probably see some more updated ones tonight, maybe. But you'll really need to wait and see what we're getting on Thursday for this. So we're a little ahead of time. The one thing with the Knicks is we are still about a week away, I would say, from OG Anunoby. Mitchell Robinson looks like he hasn't started running yet, but is still like progressing pretty well. Bogdanovich participated in Tuesday's practice. He's expected to play. DiVincenzo on track to play. Randall hasn't been cleared to practice yet, but is progressing. Hartenstein is participating in practice, still progressing. So those are all a couple spots to look for. We're going to be betting on Josh Hart over 7.5 rebounds. Josh Hart has been one of my favorite guys. He's been dynamic. He's been awesome. He has been an incredible rebounder. Had a really poor performance against the Orlando Magic, only had 3 rebounds. Prior to that, though, he had been crushing. He had double-digit rebounds in 8 straight games, 9 plus in 10 straight. And when we look at this too, he just has been tremendous without Julius Randle. In this spot, I do like paying a little bit more juice. I do like getting this at 7.5 at minus 140 at DraftKings, as opposed to the 8.5 at plus 104 on FanDuel. I think that when you're dealing with lower margin props, where the ceiling I think is a little bit lower, I do prefer to grab some of these juicier numbers here. So I'm comfortable laying the minus 140. So far this season, without Randall, he is over the 7.5 line in 8 of 9 games. He's averaging 9.9 rebounds per game. I really don't hate like a sprinkle on double-double, something like that. I am falling off a little bit of the triple-double stuff in regards to Josh Hart, with Bogdanovich there, with Burks there. You just have a couple more bodies there that can actually facilitate the basketball. But the rebounding, still a very, very solid look. In this same game, I wouldn't be surprised to see uh, Jalen Brunson obviously play like very well and continue to play big minutes. Brunson has been incredible. 29 and a half point prop. He didn't hit that too often against Philly. On January 5th, he had 29. And then on February 10th of last year, he had 30. The big thing here though is without Randall, he's been a clear number one option. The problem for me is even with Randall out, he's hit this in 5 of 8 games this season. It's the 29 and a half points. It's very high, it's a pretty high line, honestly. But now we have like an integrated Burks. We might be seeing Isaiah Hartenstein back. We have an integrated Bogdanovich. Bojan Bogdanovich. This is a spot where I think Philly's going to pick up the pace. So I think maybe this is a good opportunity for Brunson. Just 29 and a half points feels heavy in this particular matchup, where I think that teams are going to really be coming out with renewed defensive effort. It's a game that's pretty important standing wise for both Philly and New York. And I could see Philadelphia trying to break out a couple different things against him in this particular spot. I think it could definitely be problematic for New York. One other spot that I wanted to talk about is Buddy Hield's assist line is at 4.5 right now at plus 124 at FanDuel. With his time on the Philadelphia 76ers, he has smacked this. Double-double last game with 10 assists. He's been really, really good as a secondary or tertiary facilitator, and he's also been excellent from beyond the arc, taking a ton of threes, really being like a nice outlet for Tyrese Maxey. And I think that it's a tougher matchup from like an assist perspective for him. But at the same time, I think that maybe you could craft a parlay where you did like 3 threes and 3 assists or something like that. And you could find that to be pretty successful against the New York Knicks team that does give up a pretty good percentage of 3-pointers on a game and a nightly basis. So that's my thoughts on the Knicks versus Philadelphia. Go Knicks. I hope you lose, Vinny. I hope you hear this. Another spot that I think is interesting is the Orlando Magic against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Magic are plus 7.5 road dogs in this spot. Cleveland's been tremendous. Orlando's kind of fallen off a little bit lately, but one player that has been incredible is Paolo Banchero. Paolo was on like a crazy assist run. He had over 5.5 assists in 11 straight games, missed that in the last game. He finished with 5, but it's another spot against Cleveland where he's going to be asked to do a lot. The interior defense of the Cleveland Cavaliers is intense. It's pretty significant. They have so many options that they can throw at him. I think that it might become a game where he has to kick out. He has to try to get other guys going because it's going to be a harder matchup for him. That's definitely a spot that I would look for or take a lean at. I think that could definitely be an angle. The Nets versus the Raptors is an interesting one. I think that Mikal Bridges points under is definitely a decent angle here. When we look at Bridges over the course of the season, he's been pretty bad on this number. The number there were some books that opened at 25.5. It's bet down all the way to 23.5. He's only hit this in 31% of games at the 23.5. He's averaging 21.7 points per game. He's been a bit better over the last 15 games, hitting this in 40%, averaging 22.3, but it's still just not like a great spot against a Toronto lineup that does have a pretty good amount of wings and a pretty good amount of wing defense. So I would be looking to fade him. The one thing that is going to be interesting is with the new coach, what are the rotations like? What are we going to see? I would definitely be looking at maybe some Dennis Schroeder rebounds plus assists. I don't know when we're going to get that line. I don't know when exactly he's going to be if he's going to be starting, if he's going to be coming off the bench. I think that that's definitely a question. I do think though that Nicholas Claxton over 9.5 rebounds could be a look. He's played pretty well against Toronto. Toronto has definitely struggled a bit against some bigs. I think that you could either take the 12.5 points, the 9.5 rebounds, or you could even go, I don't mind a PR in the spot at 22.5, a number that he's hit in 5 consecutive games against the Toronto Raptors. So I think that's definitely a look for us in this game, even though the minutes and the role is a little uncertain with a new coach. So that's my one hesitation here. Um, the next game that we have on the slate is the Detroit Pistons versus the Indiana Pacers. The one play that I like from this game is Jaden Ivey over 16.5 or 20.5 points plus assists. When I was looking at this game, I really do prefer the points in this spot. I do understand that there is obviously some significant upside for Ivy to dish. But what I liked here in this particular matchup was at the 16.5 number, when he's played 20 minutes or more, we have the numbers jump significantly. So when he's played 20 minutes this season at the 16.5 line, he's hit that in over the last 30 games or last 15 games. He's hit this in 11 of 15 games. So I do like the spot at 16.5. This is obviously a pace up spot against the Indiana Pacers. It's a great opportunity for him. I really like this spot for Jaden Ivey in this particular matchup. I think if you wanted to pivot off of him, if you felt like you wanted to take a little bit more of a ball dominant guard, I think you could go with Cade Cunningham here. It should set up to be a good matchup for him as a point guard. It's a spot that Indiana has really struggled defending over the course of really the entire season with that type of Matador style defense that they run. But at the same time, I think that I'd rather take the 2 guard here and take a little bit more of Jaden Ivey in this particular spot. So I like Jaden Ivey in this matchup. When we're scrolling down these games, there's a lot of really interesting games or tough games. I do think that when we look at what these teams' motivations are, or how to kind of cap some of these games, it becomes fascinating. So when we're looking at even this next game coming up, the Phoenix Suns versus the Dallas Mavericks, this is a game where both of these teams are obviously highly motivated to play well against each other. Phoenix is in 5th in the West at 33-22. The Mavericks are 32-23 at 7th in the West. It's a critically important game for not only seeding, but for head-to-head, for tiebreakers, etc. Phoenix should have Bradley Beal back for this matchup. When they've had Bradley Beal, the offense has just been an absolute fucking wagon. And that's so important, right? And the biggest thing is that they've been staggering. So there's not too many minutes when they've all been healthy where one of them or 2 of them are not on the floor. You might not see super consistent minutes with all 3, but you do see the coaching making an effort to not have any of them, or to have none of them on the court at any given point in time. That type of offensive firepower, I think, is so important here. And Dallas, surprisingly, when we look at what Dallas has been able to do over the course of the whole season, Dallas has not been as good as you would expect. So Dallas is in 13th in adjusted net rating. They're plus 1.2. Phoenix is in 10th in adjusted net rating, plus 2.1. The biggest thing for Dallas, though, is their defense is in 21st. They're at 117.3. Phoenix is no good either. They're about middle of the pack. They're in 15th. But when you can put up that type of offensive firepower when Phoenix is healthy, that can actually match what Dallas does over the course of the whole season, where they're 6th in adjusted offense at 118.5. And that's because Phoenix has had so many guys in and out of the rotation. One look that I'm borrowing from our good friend Steve Keach, he was looking at Eric Gordon under 11.5 points. I wanted to see if this opened anywhere else besides FanDuel at the time. We'll take a look real quick. I think it's just 11.5 across. No, it's still only at FanDuel. The biggest thing here is that when Bradley Beal has played, those numbers really fall off a cliff for him. He's had some spikes, obviously, in a couple different games, but when he's played with Booker, Beal, and Durant, the numbers really kind of fall off a cliff. Over the course of the whole season, he's only averaging 10.1 points per game. He's gone under this line at 11.5 in 41% or 60 no, 59% of games. He's gone under. He's gone over in 41%. So this matchup in particular, Dallas is playing a bit faster this year, which is definitely an interesting point. But Phoenix, I think, plays a bit slower when they have all their guys. They can fall into that half court offensive set. They have the 22nd longest or eighth longest offensive length of possession on a given basis. And the difference is both of these teams, Phoenix and Dallas, they're faster on the back end. They're faster on defense. They give up faster shots, but both of their offenses take a little bit more time to kind of ramp up. So I do think that on the full game, I think I might lean an under. I think the line is a little bit high. But overall, I like what Phoenix can do. And I'd be looking still though at an Eric Gordon type of under in this matchup. Looking at the Rockets and the Pelicans have just been a force, an absolute force this season. And I think I'm going to be looking to take them in the first half. Coming out of a break, the team should really be pretty rested. I think that they'll be like locked in, ready to go for the rest of the season against a Rockets squad that has had some difficulties kind of defending the Pelicans. So when we look at the history of in these spots, like the one player that I'm looking at is I want to bet on Zion Williamson. Zion always is kind of missing some time, so we'll have to see like what the report looks like for him. He's not on any injury reports right now. When we look at this game, his points prop is set at 23.5. It's a number he's only hit in 48% of games this season, but he has smoked this against Houston. He's got 28, 24, and 26. So he's always kind of like in this area, but the matchup against Sengun is one that I think is pretty valuable. I would actually consider a points plus rebounds look. He's hit that. It's at 29.5 right now in the market. The reason I say that is in the last 2 games against Houston, he's had 8 rebounds. The game prior, he had 4. So I think that his line being set at 5.5 gives us a little bit of flexibility, and I think gives us a little bit of upside for what Zion can do on the court against this Houston Rockets defense. So I definitely am looking at a Zion prop from this New Orleans game. One of the most interesting games on the slate, and one of the games with like the biggest implications, is the Clippers versus the Thunder. I think this is a very, very difficult game for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're 2.5 point home favorites to the Los Angeles Clippers, who are relatively healthy right now. I like James Harden to go over 12.5 rebounds plus assists. I think it's a pretty good look, especially because Oklahoma City has pretty strong point of attack defense that I think could deal with Harden from a scoring perspective, but it should also help open up his facilitating to his teammates. The reason I say that I think this is a really tough matchup for Oklahoma City is I am wondering now, when we're looking at the standings, we're looking at how these teams have performed against each other so far this season. And when we look at the matchups the Clippers and the Thunder have played before, they're split. They've played 2 games. The Clippers have won 1 and they've lost 1. When we look at the rest of the schedule, the Clippers and the Thunder, they play today, or on Thursday rather. And that is, I believe, their only remaining matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So this matchup is critically important for playoff seeding. I think it's a game where Los Angeles might actually take this a little bit more seriously. You have Ty Lue, who's had the opportunity to really game plan for this, test some things out. I think that this game matters. I think that Los Angeles would prefer maybe to have the 2 seed or the 3 seed, or at least give themselves the ability to kind of make that decision, right? When we look at the West, given the fact that the Clippers are tied with Oklahoma City in the loss column, they're 1 win behind them. If the Clippers are able to win this game, you have the tiebreaker. You have then a loss on top of them. So that's really that really functions as like a 2-game advantage, because the Clippers would be 37-17, Thunder would be 37-18. So it's 1 loss plus the tiebreaker. super significant in this spot, especially given where they are in the standings and how hard it is to catch up in these particular, in these, in this part of the bracket, like I mentioned before. What I think Los Angeles can do that's really disruptive for Toronto, or not Toronto, for Oklahoma City rather, is they have so many strong wings and like point of attack guys, and such a good defensive scheme. I think that you can throw multiple guys at Shea and make his life hell. And the reason I say that though is when we look at what Shea has done, this season, he's been good. He had one game of 31 points, eight rebounds, and 4 assists. I believe that was an Oklahoma City win. They won 134 to 115. In the loss, though, on January 16th, he had 34 minutes, 19 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists. He was 6 of 16 from the field. And the biggest thing, though, is he picked up 4 fouls, got into foul trouble. Los Angeles really attacked him defensively. And when we look at what like he kind of had to do, he took way fewer shots. They basically were able to force him to pass the ball to his teammates, and have them try to take and make shots. Lou Dort 10 shots, Chet 10 shots, Jalen Williams 14 shots, Chet with only 16. When you compare that to what he did on the December game, you'll notice that there was like a stark difference, right? In that game, he had He had 25 field goal attempts. The next closest was 12 on the team. The demand for what he could do was so much different in the first game versus the second game. And I think that what Los Angeles is able to do is they're able to throw a couple more doubles. They're able to throw a couple more traps because the rest of the defense is so sound. And when you have a defense that's sound in terms of, like, it's not that their defensive rating is that it's so good, but they're so well coached in terms of what they can do and what they can bring to the table, that I think that can kind of disrupt Shea. And it might be something that Ty Lue wants to like sprinkle out there and say, like, let's throw some doubles. Let's throw some traps. Let's see what happens here. Let's throw Kawhi on him. Like, let's see, just in case we go to a playoff series, get a little bit of film on it, and maybe we can see what works or what doesn't work. So if I had to even bet a Shea prop, I would probably be looking at an under here. His points line is at 30.5. I'd probably be more interested in a points plus rebounds. You can get that at 35.5, or even a PRA is pretty high at 42.5. It's a number he's hit well this season, 58%. But he's not done so well against Los Angeles over the past 2 years, only averaging 38 PRA, and going over this line in 2 of 6 games. Looking at a couple more games, I like Boston. I'm not going to go too far into it. I do like Boston against Chicago. I think that the 3-point variance should really help them there. I probably am going to lay the 7, or the 7.5 with them. Looking at the Wizards and the Nuggets, Jokic should absolutely crush in this game. Marvin Bagley is basically like the sole line of defense for Washington. Don't love the spot for Washington. It's not great. I'm definitely concerned about a blowout, but Jokic scored, I think it was 42 points last game against Washington, in a pretty commanding, convincing win. I'm not super interested in playing it, but I do think that I would be looking at maybe like a Jokic triple-double, where, he can score his 10 points, get his 10 boards, 10 assists in a game where the Wizards defense has been, I think they've been more competitive, like I mentioned before when I was talking about the Denny prop, but I still think it's a relatively rough spot overall. I don't have anything in Hornets Jazz right now. If I do, it'll be loaded in the Action app. I'm looking at the Spurs plus 12 against the Sacramento Kings. In large part, the reason I like this is that I think that the Kings have dramatically outperformed expectation on the season. I don't think that they are as good as their record. They've won far more games than they've been projected to. And what I mean by that is when you look at through like some of the data that Cleaning the Glass has, for example, you can see how a team has done and how they're continuing to do, and basically if they're outperforming what their situation is. So Sacramento has a minus zero point 0.5 net rating. They've won 4.8 games more than expected with an offensive and defensive rating that they have. And they've still somehow been one of the teams that's worst against the spread at minus 2.2 on average on a per game basis. So I'm looking to fade them. I think that Wemby has kind of been unleashed. He's got a full weekend to recover, even after the skills challenge, stuff like that. Some of the rising stars things. This is a really good matchup for him. I like him to really smash in this spot. I'd be looking at 23 and a half points. I think that that's a viable play here against Domantas Sabonis. In the one head-to-head matchup they had earlier, he scored 27 points in what was this about 30 minutes he played. So it was one of the higher minute games that he's played. So I'm curious to see if the training wheels are off, but that is definitely a spot that I'd be looking at. I would also be looking at steals plus blocks is maybe an angle at 3.5, but even turnovers I think is definitely a viable option. He's really been going over that much more lately. It's set at 3.5. Kings played a relatively fast pace. It should be a good opportunity. The biggest game on the board, at least from some of our futures perspectives, is the Lakers versus the Warriors. The Lakers have indicated that LeBron James may not play. As a result of that, it's kind of made a lot of these props like very difficult to play right now. Kuminga is definitely a look in terms of his points. You have to obviously look at Anthony Davis to a degree, especially if LeBron James doesn't play. When LeBron has not played, AD is just smashing this 25 and a half points prop. He's hit it in 5 of 6 games this season. And over the last 2 years, he's hit it in 69% of games. Nice. 18 of 26. So definitely looking there. And even when you look at the rebounding, the 13 and a half, I think is high. But even then, he's been a menace without LeBron over the course of the last 2 seasons. So those are definitely a couple looks for that game. But that's the breakdown of the Thursday NBA slate. You guys are going to have plenty of opportunity to listen to this, share it, like whatever. I'm sure I'll be adding some more plays as we get closer, but did want to check back in with producer Corey and see how you were doing. Hey, at least we have the memories. We'll always have Saturday. Hanging in. My voice is a little I'm a little tired honestly right now. I've recorded a lot of podcasts over the past couple of days. It's been busy. Would you from screaming? Yeah, that checks out. That makes total sense. That makes total sense. What do you got? What what do you what do you got for the people today for Pods and Recs? Okay. Huh. Not bad. I I do have some movie or some show recommendations actually for once. I watched The Traveler. I watched The Traveler on Netflix. That was pretty good. Would recommend. It was pretty interesting. It was an interesting show. The guy, it's only 6 episodes, which is nice, and you get a culmination at the end of it. Um, I love him, love him. The gist of it is that at the beginning of this, like you see it like immediately, but there's a guy and he like doesn't have his memory, and it's about yeah. So you that's not really it's not a spoiler. You will find that out pretty much from the preview. So like you will know he knows nothing. Um, So watch that. I love Next Level Chef. It's one of I love that show. It's a Gordon Ramsay show. It's a cooking show. I've been watching a lot of shows. Like I'm like I don't know what to do with my hands without basketball on. So it's been quite the ride of like what I'm watching. Um, I watched most of it and I bet on a lot of it, and it was like really aggressive. Dude, the floor is hilarious that they were doing. Like it was the best event was the Steph versus Sabrina 3-point contest. That was the best that was the best event. I need it. Just fight. Yeah. The funniest part about it was just like there was just like a no-win scenario for Sabrina almost. It was like if she won, then it was be like, oh, well, like she used WNBA balls. Like if she didn't win, like if she lost and it's like, oh, well, she should have shot from the WNBA line. Like it was just it's tough optics like for her. It's not tough optics, but it's hard. I understand why it's hard. But I thought it was a really good event. And yeah, there's definitely some chemistry there. And what else? I have a food recommendation. So I got a grill. Did I talk about this? Did I talk about the grill? I don't remember. But I got a grill. Congrats on the grill, homeowner things. It is still there's literal snow on the ground and I'm grilling. Which is I recommend grilling even in the winter. But I've been grilling. Number one, I love chicken thighs. Grilled chicken thighs, I think, are some of the best things out there. What I've been doing is when I go to work, dark meat chicken. When I go to work, I get like I have some. I got like one of the basins that you can like cut up the peppers and onions and grill them so they get cooked on the grill or whatever. Get that little char. So I take that. I take a chicken thigh, bring it to work in my little like Tupperware. Um, and I've been buying Portuguese rolls and freezing them. And you see where I'm going with it. Yeah, I bring the Portuguese roll to work. By the time it's time to eat lunch, the roll is thawed. It's like a fresh Portuguese roll. It's not like it got hard from sitting out like for a couple days or like a week or something like that. And I'm able to just slice that up. I can heat up the chicken and the peppers and the onions like in the microwave, and then I'm able to throw that bitch right on the sandwich. It's great. It's honestly just like it's a pretty good move. Like so, I don't know what this is exactly recommending. I think it's thawing bread on your way to work. Um, like freezing bread and then thawing it. And I think that's what it is. Yeah. So I think that's really like kind of what I'm getting at. So in order to like break out, yes, and it's all about getting this bread. And one of the best ways to get bread and stay hot, like let's get out of that cold streak. Let's get out of the frozen mud. Let's get out of the frozen tundra and let's fire up props.cash. Because if you fire up props.cash, like you're gonna see these red charts, these green charts, you're gonna get nice and cozy inside. You're gonna be sitting in the lab. You're gonna be like just racking up what you can do here. So you can get this again for 25% off with my code Delara25. And at this point in the season too, we've got a lot of data on how players perform with players, without players, and that's super important as players are coming back from injury or going out with injury or, having different like season ending injuries or coming back from, the like whether they got traded or whatever the circumstances are. These are all tools that you can get on props.cash for 25% off your first month with code Delara25. And it's going to give you the ability to get that frozen bread, get this bread, defrost it, throw a dark meat chicken thigh on it because there are only dark meat chicken thighs, little peppers and onions, maybe a little sriracha mayo because we love that shit. And you're going to be able to afford all of it because you're going to continue to cash that.